Dad, this banana is too big, I can't eat it all. Hello everyone, my name is Clara. I'm 24 years old now, and I live with my dad, Richard. My mom passed away when I was very young due to a severe illness, leaving me and my dad to rely on each other. Richard wasn't just a father, he became everything to me. He filled the void left by my mom's absence with all his love and care. My childhood was peaceful, surrounded by his warmth and guidance. Life was steady, predictable even, until the year I turned 18. It was a pivotal year for me, the start of college and my first step into a bigger world outside our small home. I remember feeling a mix of excitement and fear as I left our house for the dorms, a place far removed from the comfort of my dad's presence. I was a simple girl back then, untouched by the complexities of love and relationships. Everything was new, and I was eager to explore. The first year of college was an adventure. I made friends quickly, meeting people from different walks of life. They were nothing like me, they were bold, daring, and experienced. Unlike them, I was shy, quiet, and hesitant. They knew about parties, late nights, and boys, all things I had only heard about. It took some time, but slowly their world pulled me in. I started going to bars, dressing up for nights out, and letting loose in a way I never had before. It was intoxicating. One weekend, after a wild night of dancing and drinking, I found myself back at the dorm, lying awake, replaying the evening's events in my mind. I realized then that I had changed. I was no longer the innocent girl who left home. I had tasted freedom and rebellion, and it felt exhilarating. But the thrill of college life was nothing compared to what I would experience when I returned home for summer break. When I walked into our house that summer, I found Richard sitting in the living room, watching TV. He looked up, surprised to see me, and pulled me into a warm embrace. We laughed, caught up on everything I had missed, and for a moment everything felt normal. But that night, as we sat down for dinner, I couldn't help but notice something different about him. My dad, at nearly 50, still looked as handsome as ever, his body strong and fit from years of hard work. He wore a simple tank top, and I noticed the muscles in his arms flex as he moved. For the first time, I saw him not just as my dad, but as a man. That realization hit me like a wave. It was strange and confusing, a feeling I couldn't shake. I found myself stealing glances at him throughout the night, my thoughts wandering to places they shouldn't. I went to bed that night with my mind racing, the image of Richard's strong, tan arms haunting me. I couldn't understand why I was feeling this way, but I knew that something had shifted. The next day, the summer heat was unbearable. I decided to take a shower to cool off. The cold water felt amazing against my skin, washing away the sticky sweat and tension. I closed my eyes, letting the water cascade down my back, losing myself in the sensation. But then I felt a presence. My eyes snapped open, and through the gap of the half-closed door, I saw him. Richard was standing there, his eyes locked on me. He looked shocked, like he didn't mean to be there, but he couldn't look away. My heart pounded in my chest as we stood there, frozen in place. He quickly apologized and left, but the look in his eyes stayed with me. It wasn't just embarrassment, there was something else, something I couldn't put into words. That night, when I came out of the shower wrapped in a towel, I found him sitting in the living room, his shirt clinging to his damp skin. He met my gaze for a moment, then looked away, his face flushed. I felt a strange, irresistible boldness take over me. "Did you see everything just now?" I asked, my voice soft and teasing. He looked at me, his brown eyes wide with shock, then quickly looked away. "It was an accident," he mumbled, but I knew better. I moved closer, sitting beside him, our knees almost touching. He didn't pull away. We both knew what was happening, but neither of us could stop it. The tension was thick in the air. I leaned in closer, my lips brushing against his ear. "Don't pretend you didn't like it," I whispered. Richard took a deep, shaky breath. "This isn't right," he said, his voice barely a whisper. But his hand moved to rest on my shoulder, his touch hesitant but firm. "Then tell me to stop," I challenged him, my eyes locked on his. He didn't. Instead, he pulled me closer, and our lips met in a soft, tentative kiss. It felt like the world outside faded away, leaving just the two of us. We kissed again, deeper this time, and suddenly all the confusion, all the hesitation melted away. Richard's arms wrapped around me, holding me tight, as if he were afraid to let go. I felt his heartbeat against my chest, fast and strong, matching the rhythm of my own. The kiss was slow and gentle at first, but it quickly became something more, something intense and overwhelming. From that moment on, everything changed. The line between father and daughter blurred, replaced by a bond that was both beautiful and terrifying. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. Every glance, every touch was charged with a tension that neither of us could resist. The house became our sanctuary, a place where we could give in to the passion that consumed us. Days turned into weeks, and the summer passed in a blur of stolen moments and whispered confessions. We were playing with fire, but neither of us wanted to stop. We knew it couldn't last, but we were too caught up in the moment to care. I fell asleep every night in his arms, feeling safe and loved in a way I never had before. But as the end of summer approached, the reality of what we were doing began to set in. We were living a fantasy, and eventually we would have to face the consequences. As the days grew shorter and the cool breeze of fall approached, a sense of impending reality began to creep into our little bubble. Richard and I had created a world of our own, but deep down we both knew it couldn't last forever. I was set to return to university for my second year, and he would be left alone in this house that now held all our secrets. We tried not to talk about it, but the silence spoke volumes. Every kiss, every touch felt like it carried a heavier weight, as if we were desperately clinging to each other before the inevitable separation. One evening, just a week before I was supposed to leave, we sat together in the living room. The TV was on, but neither of us was paying attention. I was curled up against him, my head resting on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. It was a sound that had become my favorite lullaby over the summer. Richard's hand absent-mindedly stroked my hair, and I could feel the tension building between us. It was as if we were both on the edge of saying something, but neither of us wanted to break the fragile peace. "Are you excited to go back to school?" he asked suddenly, his voice soft and hesitant. It was the first time he had brought it up, and I could hear the strain in his tone. He was trying to sound casual, but I could tell how much it pained him to even mention it. I looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of what he was feeling. He was trying to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes, honestly. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've been thinking a lot about it, and part of me doesn't want to go back." He frowned, his hand stilling in my hair. "You can't mean that," he said, his voice suddenly more serious. "Your education is important, Clara. You've worked so hard to get there." I could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted what was best for me, but he also didn't want me to leave. I sighed and pulled away slightly, turning to face him fully. "Richard, I don't want to lose what we have," I said, my voice breaking a little. "I don't know how I'm supposed to go back to a normal life after this. I can't just pretend like this summer didn't happen." His expression softened, and he reached up to cup my face in his hands. "I don't want to lose you either," he whispered, leaning his forehead against mine. "But I don't know how we can keep this going. It's not right, and you know it." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them away, refusing to cry. "I know it's wrong," I admitted, "but it feels so real, so powerful. I've never felt this way about anyone before. You make me feel alive, Richard. I can't just let that go." He closed his eyes, a pained expression crossing his face. "Clara, I love you," he said finally, his voice raw and unguarded. "I've loved you since the moment you were born, but this is different. It's dangerous. It could ruin us both." I grabbed his hand, squeezing it tightly. "Then, let it ruin me," I whispered fiercely. "I'd rather be ruined with you than live a life without feeling this." In that moment, something in him broke. He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly that it hurt. I buried my face in his neck, inhaling the scent of him, memorizing it. "Promise me you won't forget," I murmured against his skin. "Promise me this won't end when I leave." He didn't answer with words. Instead, he kissed me a deep, lingering kiss that felt like a vow. I could taste the salt of our shared tears, and I knew then that this was a goodbye kiss. It was desperate, hungry, and filled with a love that neither of us could deny. We made love that night as if it were the last time, our bodies moving together in a perfect, heartbreaking rhythm. Every touch, every caress felt like a plea to remember, to hold on to what we had shared. Afterwards, we lay tangled in the sheets, his arms wrapped around me as if he could keep me from slipping away. I traced lazy circles on his chest, feeling the rise and fall of his breaths. "I don't want to go," I said quietly, the words barely audible. "I know," he replied, pressing a kiss to the top of my head, "but you have to, and I have to let you." The silence stretched out between us, filled with all the things we couldn't say. I felt the weight of reality pressing down on me, suffocating the little bubble we had created. I knew I had to leave, but I didn't know how to say goodbye. Not like this. Not when it felt like I was leaving a piece of my soul behind. The next morning, I packed my bags, the finality of it hitting me like a punch to the gut. Richard stood in the doorway, watching me silently, his expression unreadable. I zipped up my suitcase and turned to face him, my heart in my throat. "This isn't goodbye," I said, forcing a smile. "It's just, see you later." He nodded, stepping forward to pull me into his arms one last time. "See you later," he echoed, but the words felt hollow. We both knew that things would never be the same. As I walked out the door and headed towards the car, I glanced back one last time. He was standing there, framed in the doorway, looking like a man who had lost everything. I waved, but he didn't wave back. He just watched me go, his eyes filled with a sorrow that mirrored my own. Driving away from the house, I felt a pain in my chest, unlike anything I had ever felt before. It was as if a piece of me had been ripped away, left behind in that living room where we had shared so much. I wanted to turn the car around, to run back into his arms and never let go, but I knew I couldn't. We had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and now we had to live with the consequences. The next few months were the hardest of my life. I threw myself into my studies, trying to distract myself from the constant ache of missing him. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment we had shared. I kept waiting for a message, a phone call, something to show that he was thinking of me too. But the silence was deafening. It wasn't until winter break that I finally heard from him. A single text message, "I miss you." It was like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair. I typed back, my hands shaking, "I miss you too," and just like that, the door was opened once more, and I stepped through without hesitation, knowing that no matter how much it hurt, I could never truly let him go. As the months passed, the hidden affair between Clara and Robert became an unspoken part of their lives. Every glance, every fleeting touch held the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. Clara knew she was treading on thin ice, yet the pull was undeniable. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage set for a forbidden play, with secrets lurking in every shadow. It wasn't long before she noticed the subtle changes in herself: morning sickness, mood swings, the unmistakable signs of a new life growing inside her. Clara's heart pounded as the realization hit her. It wasn't her boyfriend's child. It was Robert's. The weight of the truth was almost unbearable. Clara's mind raced with 1,000 questions. Should she tell her boyfriend? Should she confess to Robert? Or should she carry this secret to her grave, letting it haunt her silently for the rest of her life? One quiet evening, when the house was filled with the soft hum of the television and the comforting smell of dinner, Clara found herself alone with Robert. The tension between them was palpable. She could feel his eyes on her, filled with a mixture of longing and fear. She took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper as she said, "Robert, we need to talk." He turned to her, his face pale, almost as if he already knew what she was about to say. "What is it, Clara?" he asked, his voice tight. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words falling between them like a bomb, shattering the fragile peace they had managed to maintain. For a moment, Robert said nothing. The color drained from his face, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. He looked away, swallowing hard, before finally meeting her eyes. "Is it?" Clara nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "It's yours," she whispered. The room fell into a suffocating silence. Robert's expression was a mix of shock, fear, and an overwhelming sadness. He took a step back, running a hand through his hair, his face contorted in anguish. "Clara, what have we done?" he muttered, his voice breaking. Clara's tears flowed freely now. "I don't know what to do, Robert. I don't know how to fix this," she cried, her voice trembling. He stepped forward, pulling her into his arms, holding her tightly as if he could somehow shield her from the reality they had created. "We can't tell anyone," he said firmly. "We have to keep this a secret for both our sakes. We can't destroy our family like this." Clara nodded, burying her face in his chest, feeling the weight of their shared secret pressing down on her like a heavy stone. She knew he was right, but the pain of carrying this burden, of knowing that her child would grow up without knowing the truth of their parentage, was almost too much to bear. From that day on, Clara and Robert became even more careful, their stolen moments filled with a desperate intensity, as if they were trying to make up for the fact that they were living on borrowed time. They knew that one slip, one moment of carelessness, could tear their lives apart. The months flew by, and soon Clara gave birth to a baby boy. The family celebrated, unaware of the true story behind the child's parentage. Robert held the baby in his arms, his face filled with a bittersweet joy, knowing that this was his son, yet he could never claim him. Clara watched from a distance, her heart aching with a complex mix of love, guilt, and sorrow. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. The affair with Robert had changed her life forever, leaving her with a secret that would haunt her until her last breath. Years later, as Clara watched her son grow, she couldn't help but see Robert in him, the way he smiled, the way he carried himself. It was a painful reminder of the choices she had made, of the love that had crossed the line into something dark and irreversible. In the end, Clara realized that the greatest punishment was not losing the love she had found in Robert, but living with the knowledge of what they had done. It was a wound that would never heal, a shadow that would follow her for the rest of her days. And as she sat alone one evening, looking out at the setting sun, she knew that this was the price she had to pay for the life she had chosen, a life filled with passion, betrayal, and the heavy, unspoken burden of a love that should never have been. The story ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, heartbreaking realization: some secrets are too heavy to carry, yet too dangerous to reveal. And for Clara, the cost of her forbidden love was a lifetime of silence.